questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, last week we learned via the report of the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians that some members had, and I quote, semi-wittingly or wittingly participated in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. This is an extremely disturbing revelation, which is why we need to know who these members are who are collaborating with hostile foreign countries. Will the Prime Minister, yes or no, reveal the names of these members and the unacceptable actions of which they are accused? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question. I'm a little bit surprised because the person sitting next to him, the parliamentary leader, sent me a letter over the weekend suggesting that the Hug Commission should look at these matters, that it was the appropriate forum with the precautions in place. The House is discussing today a motion from our friends at the Bloc Québécois that we will support, and I think it's an important time for Parliament to come together and to support the work of the Hug Commission, and that's exactly what we intend to do. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government here and in the Senate to work in their interest. I'm pleased to hear the Minister's answer, but I'd like for him to confirm if officially the Prime Minister will reveal to Commissioner Hug the names of elected members and perhaps senators who have been involved in working with foreign states. Will he give the names or not? The Honourable Member of Public Safety. Once again, Mr. Speaker, our colleague should consult the person sitting on his left. He knows full well that the Hug Commission has access to exactly that type of information. The Hug Commission has access to all of the documents that the Committee of Parliamentarians consulted. The government has already been in touch. Privy Council officials have been in touch with the Hug Commission to discuss how we can advance on this matter. This is the responsible way to do things, and to rise in the House and to ask for a list of names to be revealed. He knows full well that's irresponsible, and we won't do that.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Certain members of this House acted in the best interest of hostile foreign regimes interfering in Canada's democracy. This is a disgusting betrayal of Canadians who elected us to represent them in this place. We as MPs are supposed to serve Canadians, not foreign hostile actors. Why is this Liberal NDP government fighting to protect MPs' names, collaborating in the best interest of hostile foreign regimes and not Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat what I said a moment ago in French. We agree with members of this House that the appropriate forum to look at these matters is the Commission, already set up and operating. Set up, I would remind colleagues, with the unanimous support of all parties in this House. The Hug Commission has access to all of the documents of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians looked at. Officials from the Privy Council office have already been in touch with the Hug Commission to determine the best way forward. We think that's a responsible way to proceed, not simply standing up and illegally announcing a list of names like my colleague suggests.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Boo-hoo, get over it was the most disgusting response from this cover-up coalition. This government turned a blind eye to foreign interference to protect their own partisan interests. They refused to hand over documents to that commission, and now they won't release the names of the MPs in this House doing dirty work for foreign hostile regimes. Canadians need to know who these MPs are. Is this Liberal NDP government really going to let sitting members of this House working against the interest of Canadians run in the next election?
Before the Honourable Minister responds, I'm just going to encourage all members, please, not to express their voices unless they are recognized by the Chair. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the government will be supporting the motion before the House today brought by the Bloc Québécois, asking the Hug Commission to examine this very matter. We think that's the appropriate way to do it. The Conservatives are pretending that you can stand up and release a list of names. Mr. Speaker, I asked the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Mark Flynn, this morning, what would happen if I stood up and announced a list of names like my colleagues are asking me to do, and he said I would be subject to criminal prosecution. So guess what, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to do that.
The Honourable... Order. The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
They've had years to do something and they've done nothing. And speaking of cover-ups, Mr. Speaker, there's another one. Last week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed that this government is hiding a secret carbon tax report that proves a majority of Canadians pay more into this scam than what they get back in these phony rebates. But this Liberal NDP government did what it does best. They put a gag order on the PBO, keeping the truth from Canadians. When will this Liberal NDP cover-up coalition lift the gag order and release the report to confirm what Canadians already know, that this Prime Minister and his carbon tax scam are not worth the cost?
Once again, I'm going to remind members to please not take the floor unless they are recognized as speaker to do so, so that we can hear the questions and we can hear the answers. The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We respect the work of the PBO, who provides independent analysis on the government. Conservatives, unfortunately, are misleading Canadians yet again. Our government has and will continue to support the Parliamentary Budget Officer to fulfill his role and his office. The report correctly confirmed that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back in rebate than they pay in fuel charge. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that carbon pricing is the least disruptive measure to use to fight climate change. Instead of misleading Canadians, Mr. Speaker, Conservative should take math classes over the summer and come up with a real plan for the economy and climate change.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Today, we're debating a Bloc Québécois motion to expand the OG Commission's mandate to investigate foreign-influenced members. Why did we table this motion? Because the Liberals are consistently unable to show leadership on the issue of interference. They're always lagging behind, and frankly, they should be embarrassed that the Bloc Québécois has had to take this initiative again today. They are the government. Why do they always have to be up against the wall before they move on foreign interference? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend from La Prairie for the question. Good news, the work I've done together with him and other parliamentary leaders last summer led to the HUG Commission, and we believe, furthermore, that the terms of reference that we negotiated with our friend from La Prairie allows them to do the work that is in the block motion. We will support the motion at the vote tomorrow, and we will work with the HUG Commission to find the best way to move forward. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Last week, in question period, when I asked what this government was going to do to ensure that no one in the House was working for foreign powers, the Deputy Prime Minister responded by talking about interest rates. The Bloc is concerned because of this threat to democracy, and she gave us murky spin. It speaks volumes about the Liberals' lack of seriousness. It's not a big deal, according to them. Well, yes, it is a very big deal. Will the government cooperate fully with the UG Commission once its mandate has been expanded? Our democracy depends on it. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. The answer is yes. And as I've said, it's a discussion that senior officials from the Privy Council have undertaken over the weekend with the HUG Commission. We will always be there to ensure that the HUG Commission has everything it needs to shed light on these circumstances.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister has confirmation that MPs knowingly worked with foreign governments to undermine Canada. He's known for 11 months and done nothing. All the while, Canadians have been harassed. Canadians have been threatened. A Canadian citizen was killed, all linked to foreign governments. Why has this Prime Minister failed to protect Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank our colleague, the Leader of the NDP, for the question. Obviously, The most important responsibility of any government is to protect its citizens. Far from not taking this matter seriously, our government has been the only government in the history of Canada to set up a series of measures to detect, disrupt, and prevent foreign interference. We're very pleased that members of this House are working collaboratively to support government legislation before the House right now to give additional tools, create additional criminal offences, to hold those to account who might seek to interfere in our democratic institutions, and we'll continue to always do this important work.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Known for 11 weeks and done nothing. Depuis 11 semaines.
For 11 weeks, the Prime Minister has known the names of members potentially working with foreign governments, such as India and China. For 11 weeks, he has known about MPs potentially assisting a government that may be responsible for the killing of a Canadian citizen. Why hasn't the Prime Minister done anything in those 11 weeks? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, our government is always working to protect democratic institutions, strengthen the measures that are necessary to ensure the integrity of our electoral process. Law enforcement, CSIS, are always working and take their responsibilities seriously. I have full confidence in the national security agencies, and I have full confidence in the Hague Commission to examine precisely the scenario my colleague brought up.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, here's the facts. 1 in 5 Canadians knows someone accessing a food bank. 25% of Canadians are going hungry, and 44% feel financially worse off than just 1 year ago. Canadians aren't doing well, despite this Prime Minister gaslighting them. And it gets worse. Now, there's a PBO report that reveals the true cost of the carbon tax. So why aren't they allowing the PBO to release it? He's been gagged, and now we want to know why.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the only people in this city who seem to be gagged are Conservative MPs. They're not allowed to express their true views when it comes to ending a woman's right to choose. And none of them are allowed to express a view on tax fairness. But Mr. Speaker, tomorrow they're going to have to stop deflecting and evading and take a stand. We'll see if they support fairness for every generation.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
Well, thank you for that perfect example of deflecting. Again, this is not hearsay. This is a letter sent by the Minister's office to the PBO, okay? He is saying to the PBO, this is the real cost of the carbon tax. Conservatives have been saying for months to axe the tax because we know it drives up the cost of literally everything. It is causing misery. The Liberals say that's not true. So if it's not true, why the gag order? Why are they not allowing the PBO to release this carbon tax cover-up that shows the true cost of what it's costing Canadians?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we believe in investing in affordability for Canadians with programs like a national school food program, dental care, a national system of early learning and childcare, and we're going to pay for it in a responsible way with tax fairness. So I would like to invite that member to lift her own personal gag order and come clean with Canadians on whether she supports tax fairness or whether she supports tax breaks for the wealthiest among us.
Fair question.
The Honourable Member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Canadians are not being fooled by this Prime Minister or that Deputy Prime Minister. They know the carbon tax is making their lives more unaffordable. Last week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that a secret government report shows that the carbon tax costs Canadians more than they get back. The Prime Minister has forced the PBO to sign a gag order so that he can't share that report. Canadians deserve the truth. When will this government come clean with Canadians and release the report?
The The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the people who are not going to be able to fool Canadians for very much longer are these Conservatives. For days and days, for weeks and weeks, they have been dithering and deflecting and evading when it comes to our proposed measures on capital gains. Tomorrow, they're going to have to take a stand. So I invite the member opposite to lead the way by lifting her own personal gag order and saying what she believes.
I'm going to ask members again, who've been really pretty good today, is to please just not take the floor until they are recognized by the chair. I'm certain we all want to hear the question from the honourable member. The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that after 9 years, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost or the corruption. He is desperate to cover up his own secret report, which shows that Canadians are worse off under his carbon tax regime. He knows it, we know it, and Canadians know it. When will this Prime Minister lift his gag order on the Parliamentary Budget Officer and release his report?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, surprise of surprises, that very member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek, informed, I'm sure for the first time, her own caucus colleagues, but indeed the entire House of Commons, that she picks and chooses which parts of the Conservative platform she runs on. This whole party, we know, ran on a price on pollution in the last election, but this member stood up and told us that she really didn't. So maybe she could tell us right now which parts of the Conservative platform she doesn't approve of today.
The honourable member from Foothills.
Canadians are not buying what this Prime Minister is selling because they know the carbon tax is not worth the cost. Canadians can't put gas in their car, food on their table. They know the real pain of the carbon tax. So does the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who confirmed that the Liberals have an economic analysis of the carbon tax that shows the real pain of that tax, but they refuse to release it. I wonder why. Maybe because it confirms what Conservatives and Canadians have been saying all along, that the carbon tax isn't worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister unmuzzle his budget watchdog, table a report, and admit to Canadians that the carbon tax is all pain, no gain?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the people who I sincerely believe need to be unmuzzled are the Conservative MPs. I think that it is time for Canadians to know which Conservative MPs believe a woman's right to choose should be ended in Canada. And it is definitely time for Canadians to know whether Conservative MPs believe in tax fairness or whether they believe in tax breaks for their wealthy friends. Tomorrow, we'll find out.
The honourable member from Foothills.
I can see why the Liberals don't want to answer this question. The Prime Minister tried to sell this fairy tale that Canadians are better off paying the carbon tax to Canadian mayors last week. He got booed off the stage. Even big city mayors know that the carbon tax isn't worth the cost. It fuels homelessness and food insecurity. Food banks are saying visits are up 50% and they can't even keep up with demand. There's a secret Liberal report that understands or shows that the Liberal carbon tax is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister table that report, end the carbon tax cover-up, and admit to Canadians that the carbon tax is all pain, no gain?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is fond of making inflammatory statements. He called our system of early learning and childcare a slush fund. He called co-op housing Soviet-style housing. And he called brave Ukraine dismissively a faraway land. But he is silent on one issue, and that is tax fairness. Tomorrow, he's not going to be able to dither anymore. Every single Conservative is going to have to take a stand. We'll see what they really believe.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. We need to revisit the Auditor General's 3 disturbing reports. She paints a picture of a total loss of control over public funds. Under the Liberals, there has been an explosion of untendered contracts with no explanation. Consultants have gotten rich without accountability and without anyone even knowing whether or not they delivered the required services. Public funds were allocated to ineligible projects. How is it possible to lose control to such an extent without a single person being held accountable? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for asking that question. It gives me the opportunity to remind the House that the Auditor General's work and the work of all other institutions is important, and that is why the report she tabled last week was well received. The report puts forward observations that are about identical to what we've had for about a year now, and for this reason we will continue to do the work that we've been doing for a year. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Let's recap. Public funds spent untendered and unmonitored on companies that we don't even know whether they fulfilled their mandate. Sustainable development money diverted to interests having nothing to do with the environment. No decision-making at the top, despite minutes confirming these problems and warnings from whistleblowers. Conflicts of interests, ethical problems. I have a riddle for the Liberals. Am I talking about the AG's reports, or am I taking stock of the Prime Minister's career? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for her question, but honestly, Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit surprised because, in fact, that criticism usually comes from the Conservative Party. As she knows very well, on SDTC, this is an organization that was created by Parliament. The chair of the board of directors stepped down and more as well, but more importantly, we've changed the model to continue to send money to small businesses that fight climate change. Many of them are in Quebec, Mr. Speaker, so on this side of the House, we will always do what's needed to ensure governance and support our small businesses throughout the country. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. The Auditor General's reports, especially the one on McKinsey, do much more than expose specific problems. They are about the Prime Minister's entire record. These reports portray a government that has no qualms about breaking its own rules, a government that doesn't sweat the ethics, a constantly negligent government under which a culture of complacency and waste of public funds has emerged. In its report on McKinsey, the AG points to a widespread problem. How can this widespread problem be resolved when, in the end, it is merely the result of the Prime Minister's leadership style? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you once again to my colleague. I'll note the same things I summarized earlier. The work of the Auditor General is essential on this issue, but on many other issues where her guidance and recommendations change the way we can improve services to Canadians, including by increasing confidence in processes. We have many other things to do as well. For example, continuing to invest in the middle class. There was a good announcement last week. For the first time, interest rates have gone down.
The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Canadians are struggling to afford food, and the NDP Liberal government doesn't care. From their carbon tax to red tape to the ban for plastics for produce, every single bad policy that this government announces hurts our farmers and makes food more expensive. One farmer paid over $25,000 in a single month in carbon tax alone. Farmers can't absorb these costs. And no, they don't get a rebate check. So when will the NDP Liberals get out of the way and pass Bill C-234 in its original form?
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we do believe it is essential to make investments to make life more affordable for Canadians. That's why we have put forward the most ambitious housing program in Canadian history. That's why we are making dental care available to 2 million Canadians already. That's why we've created a national system of early learning and childcare. And we know it's important to pay for this in a fiscally responsible way. So we have a plan for tax fairness. But the Conservatives prefer austerity and helping their wealthy pals. Tomorrow they're going to have to admit it.
Honourable member from Lantern Kent Middlesex.
Well, another fairy tale from a Liberal who clearly doesn't understand food production. The government can't deny that paying $25,000 in a single month in carbon tax is punishing this farmer. The NDP Liberals live in la-la land if they don't think that these costs get passed on to Canadian families. So when will this government leave fantasy land, stop hurting our farmers, and pass Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian farmers know, but this member apparently does not, that 95% of all farm fuels are already exempt from the price on pollution. And as for Bill C-234, the very tortuous parliamentary process that this party has submitted that bill to, I'm glad that my counterpart, their House Leader, has finally relented and allowed it to be debated today, but we'll see how the opposition determines to go forward on that bill that they presented and they are responsible for.
Yeah, good point.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the Bloc Liberal coalition continues to make life more expensive for Canadian families and farmers. By allowing the Senate to gut Bill C-234, they are contributing to the demise of a generation of farmers. The Bloc and the Prime Minister are not worth the cost. Food prices have never been so high, and food bank use has increased by 25% in the last 6 months in Beauce. Will the government commit today to vote according to the will of Canadians and pass Bill C-234 in its original form? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, farmers in Beauce are very smart people. They know very well that 95% of farming fuels are exempt from all form of price on pollution. This is a message that seems to have escaped their member, however, so I will give him a reminder that the bill he is talking about will not be able to assist those farmers. I look forward to seeing the process that the Conservative Party will use to try and get this bill through.
The Honourable Member from London Fanshawe.
Steelworkers Local 2918 at IMT Defense are proud to build the equipment Ukraine needs to defend itself against Putin's illegal invasion. But they're underpaid and can't afford food or rent. Despite receiving millions in taxpayers' dollars and sky-high profits, their employer hasn't been treating these workers with the respect they deserve. They've been on strike since early June to demand fair wages. When will the Liberals finally stand up for Canadian workers and ensure tax dollars go to good-paying unionized jobs?
The Honourable Minister for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the situation. We will stay on top of it and we will keep the member informed. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, big telecom companies are adding to the struggles of women and gender diverse people fleeing violence. While telecom CEOs lay off staff and give themselves huge bonuses, a recent report found that Bell, Rogers, and TELUS force extra fees and long wait times on victims trying to change their phone numbers or leave shared plans with their abusers. When will the Liberals stop being soft on telecom's giants and force them to improve services for people fleeing violence?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for a very important question. I found the situation she's describing as unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. As she knows, we have been very tough on telecoms CEOs around the country, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, despite these conservatives who are laughing, this is a very serious question, Mr. Speaker. This is about protecting women. This is about protecting consumers. This is about being Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we'll follow up and make sure that we rectify the situation.
The Honourable Member from St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, if we were creating our tax system from scratch, what choices would we make as Canadians? Would we give the greatest tax advantages to those who make the most money, or would we insist on paying a fair share to keep Canada strong? The next generation of young Canadians across this country are leading the way in telling us that they want a fair and forward-looking Canada. Can the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance tell Canadians how this government is making this vision a reality?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians believe in fairness. Many of the wealthiest Canadians make most of their money through investments, and they can often wind up paying a lower overall tax rate than a nurse or a carpenter. That's not fair. That's why today our government is introducing changes that will result in a small number of well-off Canadians paying a little more tax. This will make our tax system fairer. That is fairness for all generations.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, the Prime Minister was warned multiple times about security threats from foreign interference. He was told measures to protect something as fundamental as our democracy were insufficient, and he repeatedly failed to do anything about it. We now know that members of this House knowingly assisted hostile foreign states against Canada's interests, and the government hides behind national security and cabinet confidence while these members are still allowed to sit in caucus, sit in this House, and serve their communities second. They've redacted and withheld documents from the Hogue Commission. So will they hand over all of the documents unredacted with names?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier in question period, our government has always collaborated with the Hague Commission and senior public servants who are responsible for decisions around redactions work collaboratively and constructively at all times. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, obviously the government will ensure that the Hague Commission has access to all of the documents necessary to do the important work that we've asked them to do. That's been our position since we created the Hague Commission, and that will continue to be the work we'll do.
Member from Thornhill.
A really long way to say no. Canadians want to know who is working against.
I'm going to just stop the Honourable Member just so that we don't injure either our interpreters or other members who are listening on the earphones. If there's any earphones that are near a microphone, I just ask members if they could put them in the proper place to make sure that we don't get that Larson effect. The Honourable Member from Thornhill from the top, please.
Saying that that is a very long way to say no. And Canadians deserve to know who is working against Canada. Right. Their responses have been a convoluted finger-pointing exercise of secret committees, or worse, dismissive, boo-hoo, get-over-it statements from someone who once sat on the very committee that just...
I'm going to just stop the member once again. I see that members are not having any translation services. I'm going to continue talking until... Do they hear a translation at this time? Do we hear translation at this time, members? Or is there any translation into French? Yes, there is. I'm going to ask, once again, the Honourable Member to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve to know who is working against Canada, and the best way...
I'm just going to ask the Honourable Member, we seem to be having some translation difficulties. Could I ask the Honourable l'honorable député de Joliette?
Monsieur le Président, l'interprète signale qu'il y a eu un effet Larson. Donc, il y a un problème, ils ne sont plus en mesure d'effectuer l'interprétation.
There has been a feedback in the interpretation booth, which will prevent interpretation services from being offered.
Surtout les députés qui ont la parole et peut-être leurs voisins, pouvez-vous vous assurer que vos... Sorry. For the members of Parliament who are asking the questions, I'm just going to ask for the neighbours as well, just to make sure.
Interpretation services have been interrupted due to an acoustic incident.
And then we will... I'm going to just stop for a second. Chers collègues, il faut qu'on suspende les travaux de la Chambre pour quelques instants, just pour faire une mise à jour. Ladies and dear colleagues, we're just going to suspend the House for a couple of minutes as we explore further on this issue.
Thank you for your patience. While we conducted changes to our process.
Thank all members for your patience. Before we continue with question period, I'd like to just take a moment to explain to you why the delay. First of all, I'd like to reassure all members, and I know many members have come up to the chair wanting to know if any interpreter had been injured. Je suis très content.
I'm very pleased and relieved to tell you that no interpreter was injured because of this feedback event.
Toutefois, nous avons
Nevertheless, we have a protocol in place to ensure the safety at work for our interpreters.
Encourage all members. The Larson effect is a very serious effect for our interpreters. Their ears are their tools, and their ears help us, of course, do the work that we do here in the House. I'm going to ask members, out of an abundance of caution, is that when you're if the earphone is not on your ear, could you please put them in your desk? De cette façon-là,
In this way, we will ensure there is no chance of having an injury here in the House of Commons.
J'aimerais aussi remercier la...
I would also like to thank the new team of interpreters in place. As the protocol indicates, when this situation occurs, we bring in a new team. So thank you to these interpreters for their work.
So, colleagues, we are going to continue where we left off. We'll continue where we left off. The honourable member from Thornhill from the top. Oh, sorry. Also, one last thing. I'm sorry. Well, thank goodness we have the clerks to remind me. You will find that the default setting on your earphones has now been set to low. So for those who are expecting interpretation, you will have to turn up the microphone. Alors, le volume maintenant.
So the volume for everyone has been put to the minimum. So if you need interpretation, you will need to increase the volume for your earpiece.
The honourable member from Thornhill, from the top.
Mr. Speaker, that was a very long way to say no, and Canadians deserve to know the truth. Their responses have been a convoluted finger-pointing exercise of secret committees, or worse, a dismissive boo-hoo get over it from someone who once sat on the very committee that released this damning report. If they won't tell the truth, I'll ask the minister one more time. Will they send every document, redacted, unredacted, with names to Justice Hogue so she can release them?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Security.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that the Conservatives want to heckle, and the irony in the fact that they want to misrepresent what happened at committee. While Conservatives play partisan games, we are steadfast in focus on countering foreign interference, in putting in place the measures that will strengthen our democratic institutions. Mr. Speaker, it's ironic that the Conservatives bring up the NSICOP committee, a committee they voted against, in fact, also pulled members off at one point. Mr. Speaker, we are going to do everything to ensure that our democratic institutions are protected from foreign interference.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that this Prime Minister has a long troubled history with foreign interference, from political funding to his admiration for China's basic communist dictatorship, to his ability to turn a blind eye to Secret Service reports. The National Security Committee of Parliamentarians has seen the light and brought to light courageously what the Prime Minister has known for a long time. Members are willingly cooperating with hostile foreign states. Will the Prime Minister, after 9 years of hiding, finally be transparent and tell Canadians who they are? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, my colleague opposite knows full well that it is this Prime Minister and this government that put in place, despite the opposition of the member opposite, the NSICOP committee that provides oversight on our security agencies. So if it weren't for the initiatives and all of the measures taken to fight foreign interference, we wouldn't know what we know today. And the member, despite his opposition, wouldn't have the information he wants to have today. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. We've had to twist the government's arm every time to have answers on foreign interference, Mr. Speaker. That is the truth. The Prime Minister knows this. He knows the names, and he still refuses to act. No Liberal member has suffered any consequences, even though he knows the names. You know, Mr. Speaker, hiding behind classified information to avoid acting to protect Canada's interest is no longer an excuse. Since he refuses to be transparent with Canadians, will he accept the common-sense Conservative proposal to send the names and the facts to the Commissioner? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we have a hard time understanding this tone from the Conservatives on an issue that shouldn't be partisan. The member knows full well, and the Minister has reminded us, that confidentiality, these are very important secrets for Canada, and we could be subject to criminal prosecution if we disclose such information. This is not something we will do. I have a hard time understanding the partisan tone from the member opposite, and we will, of course, follow the laws in place. The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. The Journal de Montréal painted a bleak picture of the job market this morning. According to Statistics Canada, the number of unemployed in Quebec jumped by 58,000 in 1 year. Thousands of full-time jobs are being lost. Very bad news because the federal government continues to abandon the unemployed. As the job market shows signs of malaise, 6 out of 10 workers are still not entitled to employment insurance. The Liberals have been promising reform since 2015. It's been 9 years. What are they waiting for? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci.
Inaudible.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. I'd like to begin by saying that we understand the difficulties Canadians and Quebecers are facing, and that is why we are so pleased that we've had good news last week, which is the Bank of Canada's decision to lower the interest rate. The bank was able to do so thanks in part to our responsible fiscal policy that has allowed the level of inflation to decrease. The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville, and I will invite her to put her earpiece far from the microphone, please. The time to protect workers is now. Why do the Liberals always have to wait for a disaster before taking action? We need a single eligibility threshold of 420 hours. We need higher maximum benefits. We need to put a permanent end to the EI black hole. We need to correct discrimination against women who lose their jobs during parental leave. The Liberals can no longer support a system that abandons 6 out of 10 workers. So when will the employment insurance reform take place? The Honourable Minister. My colleague, her work is very much appreciated. We need to reassure the House that we've already made changes to the EI system. We've extended benefits for sick leave to 26 weeks, 5 additional weeks for seasonal workers until October 2024. The member opposite and I have had a discussion on this. We will sit down again. Mr. Speaker, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, interest rates are going down in Canada, and we will be there for the unemployed from coast to coast in Canada.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Explosive revelations from Global News highlight the ethical concerns surrounding this NDP Liberal government. Text messages implicate a Randy in shady business dealings from a company that the employment minister has a 50% interest in. This mysterious Randy was requesting an immediate $500,000 wire transfer. This occurred nearly a year after his cabinet appointment. If the minister claims it's not him, then who is it?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, as the member across knows full well, ministers are expected to comply with among the most stringent conflict of interest and ethics provisions in the world. This minister has responded to all of the questions, and that member knows that full well.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
I get that transparency is an elusive concept for this government, but it's in the minister's best interest to get to the bottom of this to clear his name. So far, his committee interventions have shown an evasiveness and a laissez-faire attitude towards this serious situation. Perhaps ethical breaches are so old hat for this Liberal Party that the minister doesn't see this as a big deal. Canadians, however, disagree. When will the minister take his scandal seriously and tell us who the real Randy is?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
As my colleague across the aisle just pointed out, the minister spent an hour in committee answering questions from all all sides of this House. The minister also has filed the requisite disclosures under the very stringent conflict and ethics provisions. Those measures are available also to the honourable colleague for consultation, and I would say that he has complied with all of those measures, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, the government House Leader and the Minister of Employment are not fooling anyone. The company at the centre of the scandal admits there is this other Randy. But at the same time, they claim to have forgotten what his last name is. In all of Alberta, there's only 630 Randys. So seriously, what are the odds that two of them are going to be working in the same tiny company at the same time, and that no one knows who this other Randy is? So will the minister just come clean and tell the House who the other Randy is?
The other Randy?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
For the third time, Mr. Speaker, the minister is subject to the very rigorous provisions on conflict of interest and ethics of this government, among the most rigorous in the world, and he has answered to all of these questions. The Honourable Member for Laval-des-Îles. Mr. Speaker, Canada is facing an existential crisis due to climate change. Older generations are asking what we can do to preserve and maintain prosperity for the next generation, while young people across the country are worried about their own prospects. Can the Minister for Innovation and Science update this House on the government's plans for how we will harness technology to create the jobs of tomorrow and effectively tackle climate change? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Innovation and Science. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for Laval-des-Îles for an excellent question. You know, generational equity is at the heart of our priorities, and it was one of the central themes of the last federal budget. This week, we're making changes to the capital gains inclusion rate. These changes will allow us to fund the green energy transition and create jobs for this generation and future generations. We already see that our economic plan is working. We have record investments, and we are creating prosperity for generations to come. We know that the Conservatives will likely vote against. On this side of the House, we will always be for this generation and future generations.
Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Canadians are on the hook for a shady real estate deal between the Prime Minister and his best buddy, Tom Pitfield. We know that the Labour Minister, Pitfield, and the PM went together to Billionaire Island when the Prime Minister was found to have broken the law. We know that the Labour Minister and Pitfield were groomsmen in the Prime Minister's wedding, and the Labour Minister is on the Treasury Board that approved this shady real estate transaction. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, we know this Prime Minister and Labour Minister aren't worth the corruption or the cost to Canadians. So about that cost, how much did this sketchy deal help the insider, Tom Pitfield?
The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. My colleague knows very well that this decision, this recommendation, was made by the National Capital Commission, which is an independent agency. They are revitalizing the downtown of Ottawa, and they recommended this decision to the Treasury Board without the Prime Minister's office or any other minister not associated with the Treasury Board having anything to say on this. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, Quebecers are forced to sleep in shelters, under bridges, or in their cars, while retired seniors in Quebec are forced to live in motels or vans because of the lack of affordable housing. The Bloc voted for $500 billion in budget allocations, and they voted against the leader of the Conservative Party's bill to make housing more affordable, Mr. Speaker. What do the Prime Minister and the Bloc leader have to say to seniors living in vans because they don't have housing, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. We understand the importance of investments in housing, investments in affordable housing. We also understand the importance of investments in affordability, like, for example, dental care, which is very popular in Quebec for Quebec seniors. But we know that we need to fund all of the investments. So I have a question for all of the Conservative members. Will they support our measure for generational equity with taxes to fund investments? The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, homelessness is becoming a major concern in Quebec. The resulting insecurity is becoming unbearable for Quebecers. The Bloc voted for $500 billion in budget allocations, and Quebecers are the ones paying the price, left to fend for themselves in the midst of a housing crisis. The Bloc and the Prime Minister are simply not worth the cost. Can this Bloc-supported Prime Minister think of Canadians and stop voting against every Conservative Party measure to alleviate suffering of Quebecers? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I just spoke about necessary investments that we are making. We also understand that we need to make these investments responsibly on the fiscal side. And that is why now we are going to ask the question to each member here, including the Conservatives tomorrow. Are they ready to support our equitable approach on taxes, or do they want to continue to support the wealthy?
The Honourable Member from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, if we were creating our tax system from scratch, what choices would we make as Canadians? Would we give the greatest tax advantages to those who make the most money? Or would we insist on each of us paying our fair share? The next generation of young Canadians are leading the way in telling us that they want a fairer and forward-looking Canada. Can the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance tell this House how the government is making this vision a reality? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his hard work. Mr. Speaker, equity is a Canadian value. Many of the wealthiest Canadians make most of their money through investments, and they often wind up paying a lower overall tax rate than a nurse or a carpenter. That is not fair. Today, our government is introducing changes that will result in a more fair system. I hope all members will support these important measures.
The Honourable Member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a nearly 40% increase in fraud since 2021, and the Liberals clearly have failed to protect Canadians. These scams disproportionately impact seniors and cost people millions of dollars. One senior in my riding, Peggy, is selling her house after losing her life savings to a phone scam. We urgently need better policies and regulations, including improved safeguards, more education campaigns, and better enforcement. Why is this government failing to protect vulnerable Canadians from increasing levels of fraud?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, we're very concerned as a government with any instances of online fraud that we see. I note that our recent Budget Implementation Act has numerous measures to crack down on anti-money laundering and crime related to fraud. We've done lots of work in this area successively in both the Fall Economic Statement and the BIA, and we look forward to looking into the matter that the member opposite has raised.
The Honourable Member from Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that I've received confirmation from the Privy Council Office that I'm to read the full unredacted report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians later today, I would like to ask the Honourable Minister for Public Safety if he would be willing to meet with me tomorrow to discuss ways that we can, within the letter of the law, work together to ensure greater transparency around this critical issue.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the leader of the Green Party for availing herself and accepting the offer that the minister has written to all party leaders to get their security clearance to be able to read this important report. Mr. Speaker, I know the minister would be happy to continue discussing that with her as he does with all parliamentarians. I'll certainly raise this with him in terms of scheduling, but I will point out, Mr. Speaker, once again, that we urge the Conservative leader to receive his security clearance so he can be better informed on the issues of foreign interference.
And so brings us to an end of an exceptional question period. Je reconnais qu'il y a
I recognize that the member of Lac-Saint-Jean has